The precision of this moment isn't something you stumbled into. Your awakening, the exact timing of it, the specific way reality started fracturing open for you, was encoded into your soul's blueprint long before you had language for what consciousness even means. And I need you to understand something right now that will reframe everything you've been experiencing. Your soul didn't choose this moment arbitrarily. It chose this exact configuration of circumstances, this precise intersection of your nervous system capacity, your karmic patterns reaching completion, and the collective field hitting a frequency that could finally support what you're about to become. Most people miss this entirely. They wake up one morning and suddenly the world looks different, flatter, more transparent, like they can see through the mechanisms that were invisible yesterday. And their first thought is panic. Their second thought is, am I losing my mind? Their third thought is usually some version of, why now? Why like this? Why when everything else in my life is already complicated? Here's what I need you to understand. The complexity wasn't coincidental. Your soul waited specifically for the moment when your ego structures were stressed enough to become flexible, when your old identity had enough cracks in it that light could get through, but not so shattered that you'd fragment beyond integration. Think about that. The timing wasn't early when you were comfortable and complacent, because comfort calcifies. And it wasn't late when you were completely broken, because there'd been nothing stable enough to build from. It was now, right in the middle of your becoming. Your nervous system has been preparing for this longer than you realize. For months, maybe years before the awakening moment you can point to, your body was already shifting. You probably noticed it as anxiety that didn't match your circumstances, or insomnia that supplements couldn't touch, or this restless feeling like you were supposed to be somewhere but you didn't know where. That wasn't pathology. That was your biology beginning to expand its capacity to hold more consciousness than it was designed for in factory settings. The human nervous system, in its default configuration, is built for survival, pattern recognition, threat assessment, resource acquisition. It's extraordinarily efficient at keeping you alive, but deliberately limited in how much reality it lets you perceive. Because if you could see the full spectrum of what's actually happening, the field dynamics, the consciousness substrate underneath material reality, the way your thoughts literally reorganize quantum possibilities, you'd be completely non-functional. For normal human tasks, you couldn't hold down a job or maintain small talk or pretend that any of the social games matter. So there's a dimmer switch, neurologically speaking, and for most of your life that dimmer has been set low enough that you could participate in consensus reality without constant existential vertigo. But your soul knew, before this incarnation even began, that there would come a moment when the dimmer switch had to get turned up, not because you're special in a way that excludes others, but because you're here for specific work that requires you to see more, hold more, translate more. And here's the mechanism most people don't realize. That dimmer switch, it's not controlled by your conscious will. It's controlled by a feedback loop between your nervous system capacity, your unresolved trauma patterns, and the coherence of the collective field you're embedded in. All three had to reach threshold simultaneously. Your nervous system had to build enough resilience through whatever difficulties you've faced. Your trauma patterns had to cycle through enough times that they were ready for completion rather than just management. And the collective field, the shared consciousness substrate of humanity, had to hit a frequency where your awakening would be supported rather than pathologized. This is why so many people are waking up right now in this narrow window of linear time. It's not random. The collective field has been accelerating. You can feel it, the way time seems to move differently now, the way synchronicities stack on top of each other, the way you can barely remember who you were 2 years ago because the distance feels like decades. That acceleration is creating a resonance that's triggering awakening in everyone whose soul contract included this particular cosmic alarm clock. But let's get specific. about what's actually happening in your brain right now, because understanding the mechanism will help you stop fighting it. There's a network of brain regions called the default mode network. It's what maintains your sense of being a separate self, your autobiographical narrative, your sense of continuity across time. It's the voice in your head that says, I am this person with this history moving toward this future. And during awakening, that network starts to quiet down, not all at once, not permanently at first, but in waves. When it quiets, something extraordinary happens. The boundaries between you and not you start to dissolve. You might be looking at a tree, and suddenly there's no separation between the seeing and the tree and the you who's supposedly observing it. It's all one continuous field of experiencing. Or you're in conversation and you can feel the other person's emotional state like it's your own because the firewall between nervous systems has temporarily dropped. Or you're alone and you suddenly recognize that the thoughts you've been calling mine are actually just thoughts arising in consciousness, and the you who's aware of them is vastly larger than the personality you've been identifying with. This is disorienting at a level that language barely touches, because your entire life you've been operating from the assumption that you are this separate entity inside your head, looking out at a world that's external to you. And now that fundamental assumption is being revealed as a construction, a useful fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. And here's where most people panic, because if you're not who you thought you were, then who are you? If the boundaries aren't where you thought they were, then what's actually you and what's the world? The first 90 days after awakening initiates, this is the fragmentation phase, and I need you to hear this clearly. Fragmentation is not failure. It's the necessary dissolution that comes before reorganization at a higher level of complexity. Your identity structures, the stories you've been telling about who you are, they're not wrong, they're just incomplete. And they're too rigid to contain what you're becoming. So they have to soften, have to become flexible, have to temporarily fall apart so they can be rebuilt with more space inside them. During this phase, you might find yourself unable to care about things that used to matter tremendously. Your career ambitions might feel hollow. Your relationships might feel like you're playing a role in a script you no longer believe in. Your opinions about politics or culture, or even your own preferences, they might feel less solid, like you're holding them loosely instead of gripping them as identity. This isn't depression, though it can look like it from the outside. This is your attachment structures loosening their grip. And here's what almost no one tells you. It gets harder before it gets clearer. You thought awakening would bring peace, and it will, but not yet. First, it brings the opposite of peace. It brings the stripping away of every comfortable illusion you were using to avoid growth. That relationship that wasn't really working, but you were tolerating it. Suddenly you can't tolerate it anymore. That job that was soul-crushing but paid well. The paycheck stops being worth it. That version of yourself you were performing to keep other people comfortable, you can't find the energy to perform it anymore. This isn't the universe punishing you for waking up. This is the universe removing the training wheels now that you have enough balance to ride without them. Every comfortable illusion was actually a limitation privé, preventing you from accessing your full capacity. And your soul knew, before you incarnated, before you can remember, that there would come a moment when those limitations had to go, even though removing them would be excruciating. So everything that's been hard lately, the relationships ending, the career falling apart, the old sense of self dissolving, the certainty evaporating, that's not evidence you're doing it wrong. That's evidence you're doing it right. Your soul didn't choose comfort. It chose transformation. And transformation always looks like death before it looks like birth. Now, let's talk about what you're actually discovering, because this is where it gets interesting. You're beginning to notice something that quantum physicists have known for a century, but most people never experience directly. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it participates in organizing reality. This is the observer effect, but not as an abstract principle, as your lived experience. You're starting to notice that when you hold a clear intention, reality seems to reorganize around it faster than coincidence can explain. Or you think about someone and they text you within minutes, or you need information and it appears through some unlikely sequence of events. Or you walk into a room and you can feel the emotional field before anyone speaks. This isn't magical thinking. This is what happens when the firewall between your consciousness and the field weakens enough that you start experiencing reality as participatory rather than spectator-based. But here's the tricky part. You can't manipulate this. The moment you try to use it like a technique, manifesting things you want, controlling outcomes, proving your power, it stops working. Because manipulation comes from the small self, the ego trying to get something, and the field doesn't respond to the ego's agenda. It responds to coherence, to alignment, to the quality of your consciousness more than the content of your desires. So what do you actually do with this? How do you navigate reality when you're discovering that you're not separate from what you're experiencing? First, and this is critical, you develop discernment, because not every thought that arises is yours to act on. Not every energy you pick up is yours to process. Not every synchronicity is a sign you need to follow. Early awakening often comes with sensitivity that hasn't yet developed filters, and you can end up overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information suddenly available to you. Discernment comes from developing a relationship with the sensation of truth in your body. Not truth as belief, but truth as resonance. When something is aligned with your path, your body knows before your mind does. There's an opening, a yes, an expansion in the chest or belly. When something is misaligned, there's a contraction, a no, a tightening. Learn to feel that before you think about it. Your body be the tuning fork. Second, ground relentlessly. And I don't mean this as spiritual bypassing where you just visualize roots or whatever. I mean physical practices that bring you back into your body, because your body is the anchor that keeps you functional while your consciousness is expanding. Walk barefoot on the earth. Put your hands in soil. Move your body until you're breathing hard. Eat real food. Sleep in complete darkness. Let your animal self have what it needs, because your animal self is what keeps the expanded consciousness integrated enough to be useful. Third, practice being the observer without identifying as the observer. This is subtle but crucial. You're learning to witness your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, without being swept away by them. But there's a trap here where you can start identifying as the awakened one who's above it all. And that's just another ego structure, more subtle but equally limiting. The real work is witnessing without superiority, observing without detachment that becomes dissociation. And here's where most people derail in early awakening. They fall into one of three traps. First trap is spiritual bypassing. You use awakening language to avoid dealing with actual human problems. You're in debt, but you don't budget because money is just energy. You're in a toxic relationship, but you stay because they're your mirror. You're angry, but you suppress it because anger is low vibration. This is using spirituality to avoid growth, not support it. Second trap is guru dependency. You wake up, you realize how much you don't know, and you start seeking someone who knows more. And you find teachers, and some of them are genuine, but you make them into authorities instead of guides. You outsource your discernment to them. You need their approval, their validation, their interpretation of your experience. And slowly you're building a new cage that looks spiritual but functions like any other hierarchy where someone else has your power. Third trap is premature teaching. You have some openings, some insights, some genuine shifts in consciousness, and you immediately want to share them, which is natural. But you start teaching before you've integrated. You start gathering followers before you've done your own shadow work. You build an identity around being awakened, and now you're trapped in that identity, unable to continue growing because growth would threaten the brand you've built. All three of these traps come from the same source: the ego trying to regain control by co-opting the awakening process. And the ego is clever. It'll wear spiritual robes if that's what it takes to maintain its position. So you have to be vigilant, and you have to be honest, and you have to be willing to see yourself clearly, even when what you see isn't flattering. Now, the field is moving faster than it used to. If you're paying attention, you've noticed. What used to take years of spiritual practice to achieve, people are experiencing in months. What used to be rare mystical experiences are becoming common enough that we need new language for them. The acceleration isn't your imagination. It's a function of the collective field reaching a tipping point where awakening becomes self-reinforcing. Every person who wakes up makes it easier for the next person. Every consciousness that expands creates more space in the field for others to expand. Into. This means you're working with momentum that previous generations didn't have access to, but it also means the stakes are higher, because when things move this fast, you can't afford to be sloppy. You can't afford to skip steps or bypass integration or pretend you've mastered what you've only glimpsed. The acceleration will amplify whatever you're carrying. Your clarity gets clearer, yes, but your unresolved patterns also get louder, more obvious, more demanding of attention. So the protocol is this: move with the acceleration, but don't get ahead of yourself. When you have an opening, an insight, a shift in perception, pause, feel it fully, let it integrate into your cells before you rush to the next thing. This isn't a race to the finish line of enlightenment. This is a deepening, a ripening, a becoming that happens at the pace your nervous system can actually sustain. And here's what your soul knew that your mind didn't. You didn't choose this timing despite your circumstances. You chose it because of them. Every challenge you're facing right now, the relationship complexity, the career uncertainty, the financial pressure, the health issues, the family dynamics, all of it is the exact curriculum your soul designed for this phase of growth, not as punishment, as precision training. Because awakening isn't about transcending human life, it's about being fully human while awake. It's about bringing consciousness into the places it's been exiled from, into your fear, your anger, your grief, your desire, your messy, complicated, beautiful human experience. And you can't do that from the mountaintop. You have to do it in the valley, in the marketplace, in the middle of your actual life with all its ordinary demands. So when you feel overwhelmed by how much is happening all at once, the awakening and the life chaos and the relationship endings and the identity dissolution, remember this isn't coincidence, this is choreography. Your soul set this up with such precision that every element of your current experience is serving your evolution, even the parts that feel like obstacles. The work now is integration, not seeking more experiences, not chasing higher states, not collecting initiations like merit badges. Integration means living as the awakened observer in every mundane moment. It means washing dishes with the same presence you bring to meditation. It means being in conflict with someone and staying conscious enough to see the pattern you're both caught in without losing your humanity. It means feeling grief or rage or fear fully without identifying as the person those emotions are happening to. This is the real work. This is what everything has been preparing you for, not the dramatic openings, not the cosmic downloads, not the mystical experiences. Those are just signpost showing you what's possible. The actual work is embodying that possibility in a nervous system that evolved for survival, in a body that gets tired and hungry, in a life that still requires you to pay rent and navigate relationships and figure out what to eat for dinner. Your soul chose this moment because right now, in this exact configuration of your life, you have everything you need to take the next step. Not the final step. Not enlightenment as a destination you arrive at, and then you're done. The next step. The one right in front of you. The one that's asking you to bring a little more consciousness, a little more presence, a little more truth into how you're showing up. And that step will lead to another step, and that one to another, and this is how the path reveals itself. Not all at once in a flash of total understanding, but incrementally, intelligently, at exactly the pace your system can integrate. Your soul knew this. Your soul chose this. Your soul is watching all of this unfold with absolute trust in the process. Even when your mind is terrified and your heart is breaking and your identity is dissolving. So when doubt comes, and it will come, when you question whether any of this is real, whether you're just making it up, whether you've lost your mind instead of expanding it, come back to this, the precision of the timing, the intelligence of your nervous system knowing exactly when it had built enough capacity, the way everything in your life is reorganizing around a deeper truth, the moments when you glimpse what you actually are underneath all the stories. That's not delusion, that's recognition. That's your soul confirming what it's always known. And what happens next isn't something I can tell you, because it's something only you can discover by walking the path. But I can tell you this, you're not alone in it, you're not doing it wrong, and the confusion you feel is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of transformation in progress. The awakening chose you as precisely as you chose it. Now the work is learning to live as both the human navigating the complexity and the awareness holding it all with compassion. That's the integration, that's the next step. That's what your soul knew you were ready for, even if your mind still has doubts. Trust the timing, trust the process. Trust that you wouldn't be here, reading these words, feeling this resonance if you weren't exactly where you need to be. The universe is not random, your soul is not confused, and this moment, this exact, perfect, precisely calibrated moment is exactly what you chose.